Scene one, Apple, take one.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Film Notes. My name is Shane Borza, and I'm a filmmaker. The purpose of this show is for me to interview other people in the industry and get their film notes so you can learn from them and their experience. I'm very excited today to have one of my amazing friends, Jenna Payne, here so that she can talk about what she does in the industry, what she's currently doing, and where she's going. So without further ado, please welcome Jenna Payne. So great to see you.
Great to see you too. Thanks, Shane. I'm Jenna Payne. I'm a writer, director, and producer. My background was in commercial production. I've done a lot of line producing, but I always wanted to tell stories. I wrote my first novel when I was like 12. So eventually that translated into my love of film. I used to rent movies all the time at the video store, RIP guys. I eventually decided to figure out, what is filmmaking? Like, how do you do this? And I made my first short film in 2010. And my front burner project is a dark comedy medical revenge feature called Hysteria, where a chronically ill and undiagnosed patient murders most of her doctors and blows up an insurance company, because that's a very American story.
It is, for better or worse.
Yeah, yeah.
It's funny, I know about that project, and every time you talk about it, I'm just like, that sounds amazing. But before we get more into what you're doing now, you mentioned, which first of all, I never knew you wrote a book when you were 12. So that's awesome.
Thank
But you
you.
mentioned you taught yourself filmmaking. So talk to me a little bit about that. Like, when did that happen and how did that happen? Was that something that was formal, like a film school type situation, or were you like killing library cards? Like, how did that happen?
It was a combination of things. I thought about going to film school, but ultimately just could not figure out how to take out the loans for that. I did not want to go that far in debt. And coming around to like being a filmmaker versus like writing novels and short stories was kind of a process. I did not, as a child, know what a director did or like anything about being on a film set. That was all like Greek to me. In my like early to mid 20s, I sort of was like, I watch so many movies, why don't I like figure out what that's about? And so I was working at a law firm, like volunteered to help out on a set over a weekend, and I had a blast. I was like, this is so cool, I totally could do this. And I had sort of been starting to like convert stories into scripts, and I signed up for some weekend workshops with a great woman director named Ella Tier, and she still runs like an online version, but like her workshops were super affordable, in person, great networking, and like that's not only how I learned how to like set up a call sheet, but where I met my first collaborators in New York. I just went and made a movie. I did a couple of kickstarting campaigns, and I've written several scripts, like a couple of features, some TV pilots. You learn something on most jobs, really. I feel like if you're not learning something new on a project, then you're either very lucky or like you're not appreciating the full scope of what like filmmaking offers, because every job is different, every story is different. So
Now, you mentioned New York. When we met, we were both living in LA. So how did you get from the East Coast to the West Coast? And what were you doing when you got settled into, the film capital?
yeah. So in New York, I worked in commercial production, but New York gets kind of slow in the winter. It's busy up until Christmas, but after Christmas, it's like a total dead zone. And then also, I'm a woman in the industry, and there's just not as many positions open, for set PAs and stuff like that. They'll usually call like five guys and then maybe like one chick. So I went out to LA to freelance for a month. I had just had what was honestly not a successful fun crowdfunding campaign for my Zompire Vixens from Pluto, like zany, insane project, which is how we met each other. I'd cobbled together a little bit of money out of it, but it was so much work for very little money. And I hadn't worked pretty much that entire month. And so I bought a ticket to LA and I was just going to go for like a month or two. And then like I doubled my day rate on my second job out there and was able to buy a 1990 Toyota Corolla Deluxe named Gertie, who has a custom paint job. She's great. And I stayed. I found a subletter for my New York apartment and left all my stuff there. And I had like a PO box in Mar Vista and a storage unit in Eagle Rock. And like I didn't have an apartment for almost a year. It was interesting. It was like a very sudden, impulsive decision, but it was pretty good for my production career.
Speaking of the Zompire Vixens from Pluto, which I only just noticed is behind you, I went to go grab this. I was going to, and this is something I want to get into because one of the things I really love about you is not only are your ideas amazing, but you're able to like pivot and be very creative. So I was looking for the comic book that you made and I couldn't find it. So I grabbed this, which we have framed
You
and
have
hung
one of
in our
10.
dining room because we want everyone who comes to our house to see it. So I was really excited that you mentioned it. So talk to us a little bit about that project, which is totally amazing, but also how it went from like thing A to B to C, because it's evolved a couple times.
Yeah, I think that's happened with a few of my projects. So Zompire Vixens from Pluto was like a 12 episode web series that I completely wrote and was like trying to fund in 2012, 2013. And I was pitching it as branded content. It was like a super zany, very like madcap retro throwback, like sort of mashup of these foxy zombie vampire hybrids attack Brooklyn in retaliation for the declassification of Pluto as a planet, which has rendered them ineligible for intergalactic aid. It's like this big, silly, far-reaching story with like a very particular aesthetic. I really love that project. And to this day, I think my Zompires in the Park short film is probably my best and best realized short film. Like I really feel like that looked exactly like I wanted it to, and I got what I needed. And it was like an 8-hour favor shoot with some friends in a park in Brooklyn. I couldn't find a brand. I was like pitching it to alcohol companies and makeup and stuff like that. I just couldn't find someone to sign on board, and I didn't successfully crowdfund any episodes. Fast forward several years, I got very, very ill starting it. It's all relative when it started, but like, let's say 2016. And then I had to sort of like re-envision how my career was going to be, what I could do as a creative, how I could do it. And the first project I tackled was connecting with an artist in 2018 and turning the first episode into a full color comic book. This is the full color Zompire Vixens from Pluto episode 1. And I worked with an illustrator, Carlin Madsen, who did a fantastic job. I pitched that to a lot of comic book companies and I got some good feedback, but I didn't get that version funded either.
One of the things I love about that story is that you were able to kind of reimagine the project as you went through. And you're also the only person I know that's ever made a comic book, which I think is amazing.
Oh, wow.
I grew up a comic book kid and have been to a lot of comic conventions, but I've only just seen, like Marvel and DC and stuff like that. It's always like some big company. I've never known like a person. So I love that concept. I hope that people are able to go check out your short as well, which I think is on one of your video streaming pages like YouTube or Vimeo or something. Is that right?
Yeah, you can find it. Zompire Vixens has a YouTube page, but I believe you can also find it through my Jenna Payne YouTube and my website. So,
and now as a special bonus, Jenna Payne's directing reel.
From the depths of our expanding, contracting solar system, now with 8 planets. Oh my. Come the very dreaded, very sexy Zompire Vixens from Pluto. Whilst retrieving his shuttlecock from a jagged limb, this male specimen is struck down by the Alpha Zompire. These dreaded beasts from beyond thrive on brainstems. Not that horrible canned bunk from the Intergalactic Consortium, but real, juicy, throbbing, fresh, ooze. Oh, too much? Sorry. And young male and female earthlings convene on the park to gaze at each other from afar. Oh dear, is that our zombie on the prowl again? It's scientifically proven that the best way to kill a zombie is by staking it through the ears. It's also a scientific fact that zombies cannot partake of giggle juice. Alcohol is strictly for responsible adults over the age of 21.
Could just stay here with me. That'd be good, right?
There's nothing left for us here. We have to go. I mean, you know, Sam said just...
Who's Sam?
Just someone I used to know.
Alright, fuck. I mean, if you're going to Brooklyn, I'll go with you.
Really?
Yeah.
I really do think that's what's best. Okay.
This is very kind of you. I can only assume that you're treating Gilbert just as well.
We should do it again soon. Tomorrow night, my place.
Why not tonight?
Tonight just isn't... Well, Gilda's just settling in and I have to be up early tomorrow.
No need to worry about that.
Well, my apartment's a mess. I can't have anyone by tonight.
Don't fret. I just want to see all my little girls living.
But I can't.
It's not like I bite. Please. Just for a minute.
Well, I didn't get a chance to change your litter box before I left.
The papers are ripping us to shreds because of this. We needed this murderer caught yesterday. The public demands justice. I want you to go undercover. We have to put out some bait. I want you casing that shelter starting tomorrow, and I want this psychopath caught by Friday. Last Friday! Halt the text. Wait for backup. You're gonna kill her!
Domestic murderer! You're under arrest!
Easy now.
You monster!
It's 2:45. There's no one in the place except you and me. Make it one for my baby and one more for the road.
Get your trashy wig off the strip. I will beat your ass if I ever see you around here again. There will be no more Maryland in front of Mans, you hear me? We work for tips here, you know.
We're gonna break that habit out of you.
So, does the homeless fake pulp detective get the dame? Solve the case? Will he become Grauman's last hero?
And now back to our interview with Jenna Payne.
You mentioned this other big shift of like having this illness and how that had to change and how you kind of reimagine your work in the industry. So talk to me about what that was and how you were able to do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was really rough. I would not recommend it to anyone, but basically, several years ago, I got really sick. I just like was in more pain than usual. I had trouble sleeping. I gained a lot of weight. Just had all these issues, and I like redid my health insurance to get like kind of a Cadillac plan so that I could go see a bunch of specialists. And then I was horrified by how my experience with doctors went. So the first appointment after I'd redone my insurance, I like went to this primary care physician and I was like, look, I'm having all these issues. Like there's thyroid problems running my family. Like what do you think is going on? And she literally goes, well, you're depressed because you're single, childless, and stuck in a dead end career. She'd like known me for 5 minutes. And this is not unusual in the healthcare industry. This is, I would say, more standard than not, to get written off as anxious or depressed instead of what ended up happening. I mean, I now have more than one autoimmune disease. I have a connective tissue disorder. I have neurological issues. I have circulation issues. And all of those are real biological illnesses that were ignored for a really long time. And most of them were made worse by being neglected. And I almost died a couple times in a couple different ways. So I lost my career in production. I could not be on set for 12 hours a day, much less like 16, or I've done a couple like 20, 24-hour days. So that was out of the question. I lost my career day job. And then as far as writing and directing, like writing, you know, I've done quite a bit of writing since I got sick, but directing was really difficult to figure out how to do projects. I mean, anything I've done since then has been 8 hours or less. I'm not looking to do 12-hour days for anything. It's been very small crew. It's been a lot of preparation to kind of like make sure that what I need is there. I can't like figure it out on the day and kind of like hang out and stand around too much. That's what led me to hysteria. Like I took, you know, at this point I've seen something like 60 doctors, and I would say like maybe a third of them are like at least not terrible, but most of them are still mediocre. And then like a third of them are actively harmful. When COVID happened, well, one, I probably had already been sick with COVID. I'm pretty sure I got it Christmas 2019, and it was terrible. I like could not string a sentence together for like 2 months. I was just watching ER on the couch until I got put on a super expensive antiviral. But like even beyond that, like one of my underlying problems is a reactivated Epstein-Barr, which COVID does do. And like, I just saw what a train wreck this was going to be. And so it's gotten even worse. Like I've had to make even more like adjustments to like what I want to do with my career and how, with like this unchecked pandemic that can cause like massive systemic issues throughout the entire body. So for example, with Hysteria, I had just gotten the script in a really, really good place. And it's placed in a lot of contests. It was like a runner-up for a Sundance program. I was in a directing incubator out of Berlin this past year. You know, I was going to make a live action movie. And then it was like March 2020 when I was like ready to send the script out, maybe February. I pivoted. I was like, well, what if I sequester a skeleton crew and like just the lead talent, and we shoot on green screen, and then I replace the backgrounds in post, and that'll be a little bit safer than shooting in actual locations or a stage where you have to have a lot more people. I shot a really shoestring budget proof of concept with the actors shot themselves in their apartment for part of it. We did have a discussion. I was there for some elements of it, and we replaced the backgrounds with like photos of doctors' offices and stuff like that. And it's toured festivals. It's not. There were a lot of things that were not open in LA, if you recall. Like it, I couldn't get a green screen studio. We couldn't rent any sound gear. Like I didn't have a DP, and so you can tell that there's like some issues with that stuff. But it turned out pretty well, and it's toured festivals. And I've since been working more and more on that concept. I'm now working with Fawn Davis, who's a visual effects guy and production designer, who's one of his specialties is miniature building. And so we are going to create miniature backgrounds and place the actors in those in post. And that's how the whole feature is going to look. And I think it's a really cool solution to a lethal problem for me. And it's also, like going from doctor to doctor is kind of like getting dragged through a dollhouse. Like you just like are not in control of your situation when you're dealing with like these big complex health issues. And that's what it feels like.
Sorry that, of course, that all happened to you, but I'm glad you're speaking up about it, because I think that a lot of people, I mean, my spouse has a chronic condition, and it's rough, and there's not really anything I can do about it other than be sympathetic, unfortunately. Yeah. And there's a lot of people that I know in the industry, for one reason or another, have had to pivot out of the industry. And unfortunately, a lot of them just say, well, this thing happened, whether it's to them or someone in their family or whatever, and they just go get like a regular job.
Yeah.
And I think people outside the industry kind of go, oh, good, you're working, you have a career now. But for people inside the industry, you're like, but you're not going to be able to make any of your art now.
I do think it's a tragedy that we're losing voices. And that, like I said, I did my first short film in 2010, and I got sick around, actually, so I suspected I was sick in 2016, but like, I remember very clearly the weekend where it was like a point of no return. It was Memorial Day weekend 2017, and literally the week before, I was location scouting to finally do like a real properly funded calling card short based on my Appalachian Godfather project, Shiner. And then my spine caught on fire. I have ankylosing spondylitis, which is a very severe autoimmune arthritis that like your immune system eats your spine. And that's what it's been doing for years now. For example, like a few weeks ago, Jeff Barnaby, an Indigenous filmmaker out of Canada, died. And Blood Quantum is this amazing native horror movie that he directed, like a Shakespearean tragedy with zombies. And he had cancer, and I couldn't help but like relating that, of course, to my own health odyssey. And the only reason why I'm alive is because of money. Not that I have a lot of money. I'm like constantly in debt due to medical care. But like, it just makes me so sad that we'll never see another one of his movies. And that he also complained about he just had not had the opportunity to build a sustainable career. He was not making enough money as a filmmaker. And just like, what would that look like? If he had been able to like make his money as a filmmaker, would he have had better cancer treatment? And I don't think the industry should be gatekeeping this hard. It's a huge problem, and we're losing lots of talent and lots of important voices.
I don't know if you remember, but my really good friend Del Weston, who ran AOF, passed away last year. And which I had no, like, I'm like the weekend before the festival, like, where's Del? He won't call me back.
Yeah.
And then I didn't know until I showed up, because the family wanted to keep it private. But that completely, like, I didn't do any work for like a year. He built this huge community. And one of the things that I really mourn is not only the loss of him, who was like a mentor to me, but the community dissolved. And there can be such a big loss of not only that person's output, like their movie or your movie or whatever, but also the community of people that's bound together by one person.
Yeah, I think this segues into another one of my projects, but, I think there's been, with social media and the internet, a focus on having like peers pay for stuff like that. And while I think it has its place and I think that's great, like I don't think crowdfunding a first feature is an answer for people who want to work in Hollywood. I think there is a real like bottleneck getting new talent in, and particularly talent that doesn't look like the majority of Hollywood, which is like white men. And so one of my other projects is, like I said, I have a background in production. And like I had sort of been working on this pre-pandemic, but this is mostly a pandemic baby, is I started a production company called Disaster Capital Productions. And our focus is on discovering and developing first-time features by emerging writers and directors in the genre space. I have like a slate of 5 horror films right now that are awesome. We have like multiple women directors. We have like this crazy like survivalist horror Black project that's really cool. We have a kind of Mel Brooks, Sam Raimi Jewish vampire comedy. I mean, like there is stuff out there, and we deserve a solid budget. I have, and I'm sure you have too, been to film festivals to see friends like $50,000 or even like a $250,000 first feature. And it just, there's a limit to what you can put on the screen. It's not, it doesn't give the full scope of your talent or vision because you have all of these budgetary limitations. And so my goal has been is to take Blumhouse's model, which they've kind of moved off of, and raise $5 million for these first time features, or if it's going straight to streaming, like $2.5 million, which is peanuts. I mean, when you're talking about $350 million for like a Marvel movie, like it's really no big deal. And these will be your next Marvel directors, right? This is an investment in the future of the industry and not a nepotism, right? And I think it's really important that Hollywood, who likes to talk about doing diversity, starts putting their money where their mouth is. I think it's pretty easy to make that money back, and it just pays off exponentially.
And I think that's a great point. You're not just putting diversity into the stories you're telling or who's telling them, but the diversity of where the funding goes and where the spotlight shines and where the support goes. And all aspects of that are important. So I'm glad that you brought that up. And I'm glad also that you were able to mention your production company, because that's something I wanted to shine a light on. One of the things I wanted to make sure we get to, though, as this is called Film Notes, is to get some of your film notes. So what would you say are some things that stand out to you from your years in the industry that were valuable lessons that you've learned?
Yeah, tough question. I mean, first of all, I guess I'll start by some lessons you have to learn for yourself, no matter how many times people tell you not to do a movie with cats or various others, like don't start with that. My first film was Feline Frenzy, about a serial cat murderer. Those cats were nightmares. Some lessons you have to learn on your own, but I think it's really important to have, like, especially if you're directing or producing, to have at least a general idea of what everyone on set does. I think there are a lot of people who don't really understand what different departments do. And even if, like, I'm not great with a camera, you know, I want to work with a director of photography who's fantastic with the camera, and that's like their job. They always like, you know, working with different department heads elevates your work. I'm not one of those filmmakers who writes, directs, and edits, shoots and edits, you know, the entire movie. That's not me. But I think I've had a lot of experience in various departments. I've, you know, moonlit and wardrobe or an art department or whatever. And it's good to get a taste of what everyone else is doing. And I have heard, let's see, rumors of some of these programs that for diverse filmmakers that get them connected on TV shows or something. There's lots of shadowing programs, but I don't think that would be as beneficial as like an apprenticeship. Someone who's looking to direct can just spend a week in every, like an episode in every department. And so that when on the next season you actually come in to direct an episode, you have a really good grasp of what things do. Because a lot of those directors that get put in shadowing programs or perhaps like hired for their first episode, they've done like indie features. And that is a totally different beast from working on television. And I mean, this is another part where like, women do a first feature for like, $2 to $10 million maybe. And then they end up on an episode of television, which is like a much more expensive, much more streamlined production. And it just isn't the same animal at all. Like you cannot like think on the fly on a TV set for the most part. Like you need to really have like your binder and have like your shots set up and stuff like that. And then, as with anything, accidents happen. Happy accidents, hopefully, though, if you've prepared. But like if you haven't, like you can't just stand around and be like, well, I don't actually know what we're going to do.
And that's another thing that I think a lot of people don't understand is that different aspects of the industry are so different. And you can do the same role. I'm a director. Nope.
Yeah.
Directing this and directing that are two, shorts and features or no budget, big budget TV film. So those are great notes. Thank you. I wanted to also see if you had any notes for people, and especially speaking as a triple threat writer, director, producer.
Yeah.
For people who might be interested in any or all of those roles, is there anything that you wished you had known when you had started out that you could maybe pass on?
I think the key is you really need to build your network, whether that's like peer relationships and just kind of like working on rising together, building collaborators, building your team, or hopefully finding a couple of mentors. I mean, that's certainly something that's really helpful for a lot of people's careers. In a lot of cases, you just need one champion of your work to like go to bat for you who's already in the industry. And then, you can get that first project or two made, They'll say like, you'll never work in this town again, right? But you find out that there's enough different niche groups in the industry that like, you can always find some work. But do keep in mind that like a lot of the time you may meet the same people on the way up as on the way down. So don't be a dick.
Good life hack. Mm-hmm. You heard it here first. Don't be a dick.
Don't be a dick.
So I want to make sure that people can connect with you and see your work. And you did mention a couple of resources earlier. So please showcase not only where they can get a hold of you, but also the production department or any of the social media places that you would at least be willing to give out so that people can follow you. They can keep up with some of the projects you mentioned, or maybe see some of the things you have out.
Yeah, I mean, the first place to start is my website, jennapayne.com. You can get links to a lot of my movies there. You can also find my email, actually. And then I'll be on Twitter until Elon Musk blows it up, I guess. It's at Jenna_Payne. But yeah, you can find me on those and, reach out.
And we'll put all the information in the show notes, and I'll even throw stuff on the screen. So somewhere here, you'll see all the things. You can just click and follow. I'm so happy that we were able to connect again. Thank you for being on the show. I'm a huge fan of your work. I hope everybody gets to see it. And for those of you watching, so this is season 2. If you missed the first season of both the web series and the podcast, because this comes out in both formats, please go find season 1. And if you'd like to support the show, please go to my Patreon page. All the information is in the show notes, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks, Shane.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to support the show, please click on the link below. You can also contact me at my website if you have any questions about filmmaking or anything else. Off to the side, you'll see a couple of my books, Film Notes and the Film Notes Workbook. I encourage you to check those out if you'd like to learn more about filmmaking. See you in the next episode.
Scene 1, Apple, take 1.